All right, thank you everyone for joining. We may be expecting a couple of more people to join in. I'm just going to share the HackMD file that I probably have shared earlier with some of you. And this is just a list of proposals which are available on EAP repositories for URI or URL standard. I know this is the idea of MadGnet, to have all these people in a room and we can probably talk about standardization process or how we can have one good standard available for URI and URL. So Matt, if you would like to maybe provide a brief introduction of your thoughts, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. Yeah, thanks a lot for coming on here. I appreciate everybody's time. I have to say that this is like a bit outside my domain of experience, but oh, hi, Pedro. But I just wanted to say that it feels like there's a lot of different standards that are starting to bubble up now related to URLs, URIs, referring to information on the Ethereum blockchain. And it's not clear to me how much overlap we have on these types of things. And maybe the outcome of this call is that there's really not a lot of overlap, and people will just keep doing their own types of things. But because they're so closely related, it feels like having a slightly more monolithic standard here could be valuable, rather than fragmenting this across like 3, 4, 5 different standards that are referring to individual things. So, hey, Micah. So I feel like if the outcome of this call is that we can at least just figure out like what exactly are people doing, what do they want to accomplish with these standards, and how can we group these in a way that makes sense, and then figure out what applications and what libraries are going to need to support these things. That way we can work on making sure that those things are upstreamed into those, because it's, you know, it's something that we've seen before where people come up with good standard ideas, but they don't ever make it into like canonical upstream sources. And so like a good example is like if you make a change to the RPC, but it never is upstream to Web3.js or Ethers, then, you know, more or less you didn't make a change to the RPC, because that's the interface most people access it via. So I think that, you know, if we can come up with those two ideas, or if we can figure out those two areas, that would be great. Hey, Micah. The 2-sentence description of what we're here for is to figure out how much overlap there are on these URL, URI standards, and figure out the best path forward for not having too much duplicate work.
Sweet. I think from my understanding right now, there's a couple schemes out there. There's the Ethereum scheme, the DApp, WC, and ETH PM or ETH NPM, right? So under DApp, Bruno Bard 79 has made a URL for dApps in general to basically have deep linking into mobile wallets, so you can that way open up your mobile wallet. WC is for Wallet Connect. They have their own URI scheme that they use for all their fun stuff. And that is like Wallet Connect specific actions. Mm-hmm. There's the ETHPM scheme, so ETHPM : / which I think is to link to Ethereum packages. Mm-hmm. And
yeah,
then there's...
Does anybody use that? That's
I
don't even know. Okay.
It's the first time I'm seeing it. And then there's the Ethereum scheme, which as of right now, if you do not put anything behind it, so there's 831, which defines that there's just Ethereum : some prefix, dash, and then the payload. Mm-hmm. The current prefixes that are in use are the pay prefix. If you put nothing or you put the pay prefix, it's a 681. So it's for transaction requests. So you can request a payment or a specific transaction to or interacting with a smart contract. Let's see, 2400 or 2400 describes Ethereum : and then as prefix TX to be able to link to a transaction. So say you had a vending machine or some appliance that interfaced with Ethereum, they can give you a link back to the actual transaction that you just submitted, or to a past transaction, etc. Or we can, in our browser, link to transactions without having to specifically link to Etherscan or Polygon Scan or whatever. So it's Ethereum : TX dash transaction ID, and then @ and then the chain ID, and then some extra information. And then the one that I've now proposed together with a few of the co-authors is 5094. That's still an open pull request. And that is for actually switching to networks. Because what I realized is I'm working on a little project in Ethereum vending machine, right? It's an appliance. It needs to interface with your mobile phone somehow. So we're using QR codes for it. And what the situation is that like the ETH URL parser NPM package made by Bruno, which is funnily enough the guy behind the dApp scheme. He was both at MetaMask and he's now at Rainbow. He wrote ETH URL parser, and it only kind of supports part of 681. Like it doesn't support any of the like calling functions on a smart contract except for transfer. It's kind of hard coded in there. So I have spent the past week or two upgrading the ETH URL parser NPM package, and it is now fully compatible with not only 681, but also 2400 and the currently open PR for 5094. And it supports all of them, and it's migrated to TypeScript, and it's lovely, and it works. And I've been back and forth with Bruno on changes that he wants to see, and then making sure that all happens. However, the issue that I noticed with the mobile wallet is that I'm deploying my stuff right now on Polygon to test everything out, which obviously is not ETH mainnet. And scanning a URL or URI, if you will, using MetaMask or Rainbow, which parses it through ETH URL parser, appears to fail if you try and use a chain ID that doesn't exist yet, right? That hasn't been added to the mobile wallet. So if I haven't added Polygon manually, typed it out, everything to my mobile wallet, then I simply can't make a Polygon transaction. So the idea of 5094 is to kind of mirror the RPC variant, because we need it in a URL standard as well, to be able to use it in QR codes, where I can just put a sticker on the vending machine that says add the Polygon network, same way we have the button at the bottom of Polygon, Polyscan, to add it to MetaMask, for example, right? And instead of running an RPC call, in this case, there's a URL, Ethereum : network add, and then all of the information for the network itself. So the network name, the currency name, decimals, etc. So that's kind of the situation there.
Thanks for the overview. That was really nice.
So your particular use case is you want to create a URL that also includes all the information about what network to connect to.
Bingo.
Basically.
Because
Yeah,
for
okay.
payment requests, there's only the actual chain ID, right?
Yeah.
And that's not going to get us far. That's not going to give us an RPC endpoint or a name or whatever.
So, okay, so maybe the first thing we should do, like after the summary of everything that's out there, is go through and actually list all the use cases people have as opposed to the actual standards. So right now we have like network switching. What other use cases do people have that they want to talk about? If you don't mind.
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking the question because like I saw like there's a similar comments regarding the different type distinct use cases like network switching, and also for example transaction receipts, and also the apps. So I feel like probably we can put two categories, kind of like a core EIPs versus ERC, which is one type of URL is help the basically the users to locate, for example, read and write the basically resources on top of Ethereum. For example, it can be a request a transaction, it can read a state or read maybe block, or read, for example, any result that is returned from smart contracts. That's something I feel like is highly correlated, and probably we can put it in one EIP. And probably there are also a couple of other types of kind of like ERC that request kind of like, for example, putting a new network, or for example, add a dApp link so that it can designate what kind of network ID it is. This is kind of initial thought after reading all this EIPs. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions?
Hey, Joe.
I mean, I'm not a fan of network switching, obviously, but isn't it better that we just have optional parameters to an actual action? You know, because it would take one QR code scan. I know it would become like quite a significant QR code. You want to reduce the data in a QR code so it's readable. But for example, you have chain name RPC URL. RPC URL seems relevant, but then shouldn't wallets just do most of this work? I feel like
In that
sometimes we
case-
put too much pressure on dApp developers, and then the wallets do the least. Like you're giving the chain name, symbol, decimals, Explorer URL, all of it through a QR code when you know, a single chain ID should be sufficient.
I mean, it still depends, because then you're relying on the wallets to pick what RPC endpoint you're going to use, right? So then the wallet becomes the deciding factor on what RPC endpoints get used. With 5094 right now, you can even give a list of RPC endpoints, but I mean, like you suggested, we could, hypothetically speaking, amend 681, right? The Ethereum actual payment standard, and that's already final, and add query parameters for RPC URL, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, that would make the QR codes, like you mentioned, really detailed, right? Or
I mean,
the link's super long.
I think you could.
I
Just,
feel like the RPC URL would be sufficient.
yeah, because you can get everything from that.
I mean, then you still have to add an RPC URL to your thing. So it's going to add more complexity to the URL in overall, right? Because it's going to be Ethereum Pay dash whatever contract you're interacting with / whatever function you're interacting with, then gas price, gas limit, and gas estimate, as well as value, and then every argument you're giving to the function, which probably also, if it's like an ERC20 transfer, contains another address, right? So you already have a very long URL that's already very detailed and requires, in my specific case, but I can see this in a lot of other cases as well, requires more detail. So if you're going to print stickers to do this, they're going to have to be very detailed. If you're going to use a low-res display, you can't, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not quite understanding the motivation for including RPC endpoints or URLs in this standard, because
In 681,
from my is that in 681 or is that in the standard you're proposing?
681 doesn't have anything currently. What I'm proposing is making a specific URL dedicated to adding a network. So instead of it being pay dash, it is network dash, and then the network information. So you can scan a single QR code that you can attach to wherever, put it on a site, whatever, to just add the Polygon chain or add Optimism or whatever, which would do the equivalent of pressing the add to MetaMask button at the bottom of Etherscan, for example.
What flow are you imagining with this? Because the way that I interpret these flows is that the wallet should really be the one who decides what network it supports, because right now there's pretty good overlap with ETH and Polygon and Optimism, but that doesn't necessarily have to be true. And so just adding a network and assuming it has that same interface as another network could cause problems.
What do you mean with same interface?
Just these networks assume that there's a specific interface for interacting with the network and that there's certain assumptions that are being made. I mean, you could imagine that a network performs completely differently. I mean, there's already these differences with L2s right now, right? Like if I submit a transaction to an L2, then that transaction actually isn't posted to the mainnet. And so there isn't very good guarantees that it's actually going to go on chain for several minutes. And there's lots of just small things like this that wallets might want to interpret in certain ways. And so always just assuming that it does the same thing as mainnet does might be problematic and might cause users to, encounter strange issues or strange behavior when they add some more esoteric sidechain or L2. So this is just all to
Right.
say that it feels like the wallet should dictate what network it supports. And
Yeah.
if you try to use a QR code that doesn't support, then that should be handled, in a better way. Like crashing is obviously not an acceptable way to handle it.
That's what's happening currently.
Right.
Well,
But
but
we're
then
working
this
on it.
proposal kind of fits your requirement, right? Because you as a user would scan the QR code for network ad before doing the pay.
Correct.
So I end up being the same. At least you fail for a different reason. You know why you're failing, while the
Yes,
other one is
so-
just like randomly failing, and who knows why.
The ideal flow that I'm imagining here, and obviously it's not the most ideal, but it is the best we can do with the current situation of 681, is that a user would walk up to the machine they'd like to interact with or the site that they'd like to interact with, assuming they don't use Wallet Connect, and try and scan the payment request URL or QR code, and then their wallet should give an error saying unknown network, or please add the network with this ID first, right? And then the user will probably look down, realize that there is a little pop-up at the bottom of the screen that says to add network, scan this QR or click this link, and then the user can scan that to actually add the network. So I'm simply making the equivalent of the RPC function to add a network, but then in URL format, if that makes sense.
So I think it does make sense, but I'm concerned. Like I'm already concerned with the RPC endpoint for adding network, and the reason is in that situation you described, I really don't feel like that user should be adding a network from a vending machine. Like either you are familiar with the network you're interacting on, or you're not, and you should go research it. And like
Fair.
normalizing this behavior of getting users to just like scan QR codes in the subway and add them to MetaMask feels very dangerous and ripe for abuse. And so I'm very hesitant to normalize that and make that like an acceptable thing. I feel like you should tell the user, hey, we're on Polygon. You need to go get some Polygon ETH. You need to go research what Polygon is. Then you can come back and use this vending machine. Not like, hey, this is a vending machine. Sign up here to get your free candy bar.
But most wallets get mad at you if you try and add a network and you use the incorrect information, right? And worst case scenario, somebody adds a third-party endpoint. I mean, you have a chain ID and you have an RPC URL. I don't see how this could go wrong. The worst case scenario, somebody who makes this malicious QR code adds an emoji next to Polygon mainnet, right? Matic mainnet.
So I think the worst case scenario is I've never used hypothetically I've never used Polygon before. So I go up to vending machine. It says add Polygon. I scan the QR code to add Polygon, and I buy my candy bar or whatever. I now have Polygon. I'm like, oh, Polygon is nice. I'm using it. And then I go do some other stuff on Polygon. But lo and behold, this whole time, I'm not actually talking to a real Polygon RPC endpoint. I'm talking to some malicious endpoint that is then forwarding some of my requests to Polygon and then capturing some of them and doing bad things, sending me bad data back, making me think that I'm going to do something that I don't intend to do, stuff like that. Like I've basically just added something I got from a QR code as an authoritative source of information about the Polygon network. But I have no reason to believe that is actually the Polygon network I'm talking to. It's just, some dude on the internet, or in this case, some dude in a subway.
At that point, you'd hopefully have your wallet either interfere, your wallet have a pop-up when you scan the QR code actually showing what you're about to add as a network. And I mean, it's the same situation when you go to any website that says add the Polygon network and you just press the button there, right?
Yeah, and I think that's terrible as well. Like, to be clear, I'm not saying just what you're proposing is bad. I'm saying like this normalization of people adding networks without knowing anything about them, I think is bad for the security of end users. Like right now, the users that are doing this are, apes and degens and whatnot, and they know the risks that they're getting into. I'm much more worried when you get the mom and pop that is normalized into, oh, if I see a new network, I'm just supposed to click add. And those are the ones that are going to get scammed, I'm concerned about.
So do you have any better solution in mind at the moment? Because I'm fully on the same page as you. I just, personally, I don't see a better solution.
I think what Matt was getting at, is the best from a security standpoint solution, which is the individual wallets add support for networks natively, and you trust your wallet presumably because you're giving it your private keys, and so they are delegating authority to, okay, we MetaMask assert that this is how you access Polygon. You access it through this inferior link that we have baked in, or you can add your own manually, but that's an advanced use case. And then in theory, the wallets add a bunch. This, I recognize, this does make it hard to get new L2 adoption because you need to sell the wallet on it first, or you can only sell it to advanced users. But the trade-off we have to make here that I don't see a solution to is end user security versus ease of adoption. And I tend to fall on security just because I worry not about the current generation of users. I worry about the next generation of users who are just going to get just destroyed.
Well, but the problem is already present with the RPC. This URI is not adding the problem. And I don't even think it's extending the problem, because it's going to be the exact same pop-up, right? When you scan the QR code or you receive the RPC request, you will get the exact same pop-up to the user, which will provide the exact same information of chain ID, name, and everything.
Yes, so I agree. The RPC is bad as well. I just I'm not a fan of making it worse. I'd rather talk to wallets and can tell them to remove that RPC rather than adding even new and simpler ways to do the same bad thing. Like I consider users clicking a button to add an RPC with no, when you set up a MetaMask wallet, they go through 7 steps warning you about all the things that can go wrong. When users click the button to add an RPC, everything seems to just work and it's one click and it's easy. And users are not aware of the dangers that they're getting into. And that concerns me.
Outside of Chain ID, is there any way we can validate that you're connecting to a legitimate, not interfered with node? Probably not, right?
Nope.
The only way you could do that is by sampling, and you'd have to sample multiple RPC endpoints that you could think you could trust. But even then, you can spoof the response of the JSON RPC, which is what I do for testing.
Yeah, when you install MetaMask, they give you the Infura one, and you're implicitly entrusting Infura by delegating your trust through MetaMask. If you ask the hardcore security people, they'll say, no, you should run your own node. That's the only way you can actually trust this. There, of course, is a spectrum between, just subway RPC endpoint and run your own node, and Infura is somewhere in the middle. But you are correct. There's no way to gain that trust other than through an existing trust network. Which may mean you're running your own code. It may mean talking to a friend who you do trust about all these things, who tells you, oh, Infura is trustworthy, or here's my node, you can borrow it, etc. The further away you get from that trust network, the more at risk you are of someone man-the-middling you, basically.
Well, the internet works with DNS, and I think we should be using registries more. We currently have one big Ethereum or EVM registry, and people should be taking advantage of those, even in the case of the RPC endpoint.
One thing worth noting too here is I think we're complicating. This is 2 separate issues, right? It's one is the standardization of just some URL format. The other is what does a wallet developer need to make their experience better? I think Mika kind of hit it good, where it's this makes wallet developers' lives easier, but realistically, A, how many EVM chains are people actually adding all the time? And B, if that's if the problem is the lack of EVM chains, the wallet developer should either enable advanced functions like in MetaMask, where you can just add an RPC, or they should just be updating their app more frequently. I just don't see a reason for expediting that process, because like Mika said, if you're at a vending machine, it's oh, add this random network and you need to procure tokens and stuff to begin with, or bridge them over. It's already super risky at that point. And realistically, you should be saying, why haven't I heard of this L2? And where, there should be a lot of questions at that point. And if there aren't, we're not educating our users in the right way by allowing it.
I mean, you might have just not added your mobile wallet, the new networks yet. In my case, I didn't have Polygon added yet, so
Yeah, but like, why doesn't
I get it.
like a wallet should add the standard L? Yeah, all I'm saying is like a wallet should be adding the standard L2s. You know, that's my like.
Yeah,
kinda-
it feels like there's like a spectrum where we can push more of this work towards developers, like on the application side, and then a spectrum where we push more of these things to the wallet developers. And it feels like we are not pushing things hard enough onto wallet developers, and we're accepting that they give us like basically the bare minimum to interact with these chains, and then we do everything else. And it kind of feels like that's not the best approach.
Yeah, and also on that note, I mean, like at the same time, it's kind of like, you know, with really, it's like, who are you building your wallet for? The generic user, or like somebody that needs to do like more advanced testing or whatever it is? And it's, this feature seems like it's really helpful for, you know, someone like us who might be wanting to test networks all the time, but not super helpful for the generic user, as it just like compromises too much security.
I want to take a step back quickly. We're kind of running up on time and I don't want to keep people too much over. So the people on this call probably have a pretty good perspective on what types of things are lacking in this, you know, sort of domain of URLs, URIs. Is there something that we should be doing to more actively cultivate standards in this area? Like what's the best way to improve, you know, the situation that users are interacting with? And like in this example where we have this EIP to add extra new networks to wallets, like this is obviously important given the situation we're in where wallets are not probably doing what they need to do. Like how can we then like transition to making wallets do the right thing?
So you want to, instead of talking, okay, so we've agreed that this is just a URI format, right? And that's that. And the greater problem at scale is we need to like tighten down on wallets and go, hey, you should take some responsibility for your users and like make sure they're safe. How do we resolve that? I mean, we'd need some way, right? Because it would be sketchy if wallets started keeping a list of trusted RPC endpoints, because then we're back to centralization, right? To an extent.
But
They already do that. They already do that.
Okay.
So
Mm.
we I wouldn't say we're back to. We are still in the same
Oh,
bad
okay.
situation.
We're still in. Okay.
Yeah.
but
So we're looking
you know,
for improvements on that.
You're giving full trust to your wallet. And so I think that,
Right.
you know, on the things that you've already decided is okay, like them deciding what RPCs you interact with is, you know, not as bad as what other things that they could do.
It's not the biggest concern. Yeah, fair.
I don't know, Sam, do you have any thoughts on things we can do with wallet teams to talk about these situations?
I think it's just important to include them in the discussion of what's possible, and what they'd like to see. Like I definitely think having a registry of endpoints that wallets maintain might be a good idea, but that's about as far as I've thought about it.
So
Just
like some sort of spec that says this is the wallet namespace.
And then linking
Or
chain
different.
ID to a list of RPC addresses and some basic information, right?
So I'm a fan of the way Uniswap handled this with token lists, where it's a decentralized system. You can pick your list, and the app can support the list, but you don't need to couple the two. And so I might use MetaMask, but I might use, you know, the Sam Wilson list of RPC endpoints instead of MetaMask's. Because
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Endpoints.
Not giving me a list, but using the Uniswap like token list model.
I mean, isn't that
Trusting Sam
essentially
is a
what
great
we
idea.
have? Isn't that what we have basically now, though? It's not a list, but you have the ability to configure any specific one.
Yeah, so they do with, I mean, Uniswap originally was that, right? You could manually add any token, but people were frustrated because, you know, there's so many tokens and adding them all one by one was a pain. And so they made token lists, which is now, instead of adding each token individually, you can add a list of tokens from somebody you trust. And that doesn't have to be the person whose DApp you're using. It can be someone different. And so your wallet is one entity, and they give you a default list, maybe like MetaMask gives you Infura because it's consensus and they own both. But you can say, you know what, I want to use all the RPC endpoints as provided by, Rainbow Wallet or whatever, or Sam Wilson, or wherever you're getting your list from. And now you have a fully populated list that is not just Infura. It's also a bunch of other places.
Well, this sounds like something we could bring up with the all wallet devs and get an EAP together for creating that.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So that's
Do you think
one
in the
action item.
meanwhile? Do you think in the meanwhile, 5094 is a temporary solution, if you will? I mean, yes, there's going to probably be sketchy subway things, but there's also sketchy websites where you press the button and it triggers the RPC endpoint, right?
Yeah, like I said, I would rather spend our efforts trying to get people to removing that from wallets rather than making it easier. That's my personal view. Like, I want to go the other direction.
Right, but that's going to take time.
Yes,
and effort.
And I do not want to go towards more or towards less secure while we are working on going, because there's opposite directions, right? Either we go towards make it harder to add RPC endpoints from random places on the internet and random places in the world, or make it easier to do those things. What 5994 is describing, if I understand correctly, is let's make those things easier. And I'm saying, no, we should be making them harder. Like, these are in tension with each other. You can't really do both. You do one or the other.
5094 is simply a mirror of the RPC version, like the JavaScript API version that already exists, right?
And we should get rid
So
of the JavaScript API version and not add things that use it.
Okay. All right. Do you think do you see how there could be issues if we had a QR version or like link version, if you will, URI, for adding one of those trusted lists? Because then you're still in a similar situation where a user gets told, hey, just add this listing to your MetaMask wallet. Ta-da. Right?
Yeah, same thing. So the way Uniswap handles this is they don't give you a list. They give you a place to put a list. And then it's up to you to go find a list. And they give you a link to a place that's got like 100 lists listed. And you can pick from them. Like they give you a breadcrumb basically on, hey, here's how you can get started on finding.
But they don't automate it, right? Which is, I think, the yeah.
Exactly. That's the key. It is up to the user to go find the list. And we don't want, and specifically we don't want giving people a list, because that's delegating trust to the person who gave you the list, which is probably not someone you should trust. Like anyone who gives you a list is probably not the person you want to get a list from.
Right.
Okay, we're a couple of minutes over. I've got two main action items that I wrote down. One is talk to wallets about just properly supporting RPCs and considering supporting some type of RPC lists. That way we're not coupling those two as tightly together, and do some work on trying to remove this RPC endpoint that lets users add new RPCs to wallets. Is that roughly what we've come to?
Oh, and schedule the next one of these working group meetings so we have a deadline.
So I will acknowledge that you are going to be fighting a very, very hard uphill battle to remove that RPC endpoint.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, if for those of you not aware, the cryptocurrency DApp space likes to move at breakneck speed, ignoring all security concerns.
Yes.
And that is that RPC endpoint was one such thing where it was like, hey, we want to get layer 2s working before they're decentralized, while they're still censorable, while they're still centralized, while people can still steal all the money, before they're audited. We want to get them into user hands right now with a single click. And the RPC was added.
Okay.
I'm bitter.
So I presume that this is going to take a fair bit of time. Like, this is not something we'll have done in the next like week or two, right? And then we need wallet adoption as well, and it's just going to keep going and going and going, and then eventually we'll reach the effort of removing add to MetaMask from EtherScan and PolygonScan, right? And the whole thing like chainlist.org or what is it? Something like that.
Tokenlist.
Chainlist.org.
Lists.
Pop that here.
Oh, chainlist.
Sites like these would then completely disappear, right?
No, they just become a token. They'd become a list that you can subscribe to, right?
Yes, so you could subscribe to chainlist.org. Like, that could be where you get your list of chains.
Hopefully it's in your wallet already, right? So most users won't even use Chainlist because They already have one given from MetaMask.
They'll have the MetaMask list, but then
The
they will have the
advanced
option
list
of
maybe,
switch.
but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
but
I mean, the way-
let's be real. Most people don't change their default browser and still use Safari or Google Chrome or Edge, if you will, depending on the device.
So yes.
So
the way Uniswap handled this, which was good, I think, is their built-in list was incredibly limited. It's like DAI, USDC, USDT, and ETH and WETH, I think, or something like that. And then it's up to you if you want more. And so in a perfect world, there's no perfect world. In one hypothetical world, the wallet comes with a default list that is fairly constraining, and then any user who wants to do anything more would go find a list and add it. So like chainlist.org, they'd use theirs or something. There's another alternative world where MetaMask includes chainlist.orgs or includes their own, but it is very thorough and complete. And you're totally right. Most users will not change it, which is unfortunate because it just means we're delegating more and more trust to the wallet. That being said, the wallet is at least someone you have trusted your keys with. And so they're already have so much power, it's perhaps not that bad of a problem if they also have the ability to man and middle you.
So here's what I'd like to propose, and give me a moment to like properly put this out there. I really want something like this, and I understand that if we currently put it on the track of making the better version of this, right, it's going to take a fair bit of time. I think what is very possible is that we actually, don't get scared, merge 5094, but we add some kind of clause at the bottom that says that it has an expiration date and that it is awaiting for override from a future EIP that we will be working on and getting implemented into wallets. So for the meanwhile, that is a feature, because again, it's just a mirror from the RPC feature that already exists. And then as soon as we are ready to replace the RPC feature, we can also immediately throw out 5094. Right? So essentially it says, hey, this is here temporarily just to add support. It will be deleted in the future, if that makes sense.
So I don't think any EIP editors are going to stop you from merging that EIP, even if you don't agree with it. But I think it's one of those things where if you want to build it for your dApp and convince wallet developers to do it, you certainly can. But I don't think it's something that we should like actively try to encourage, because if applications build on top of it, then you get a bunch of momentum to keep it, and then as that momentum builds up, it becomes harder and harder to remove it. So right now there's like, let's say, 10 dApps that use the RPC endpoint and 10 dApps that would use the URL. Well, if we add the URL, now you have 20 dApps that are pushing back against removing the endpoint. So that's my concern with standardizing it.
Yeah, we can add a section to it that says discourages use of this endpoint only for temporary purposes or something along those lines. The use of this EIP until the new standard comes out. So essentially, it's like a deprecation warning ahead of time, if that makes sense, right? And then we can immediately in there also formulate deprecation of the actual RPC version, right? Can't remember exactly what EIP that is.
Be two separate EIPs.
Okay. So we'd have to make an EIP that says this is a notice. We are deprecating the RPC endpoint somewhere in the near future, and there will be a replacement system incoming.
I would say just convince wallets to remove it. No one is forced to adopt any given standard. In fact, there are far more standards that are not adopted than there are that are, and so it's just a matter of getting wallets to stop adopting it. So.
And if I may add here, this proposal is at present is in the PR status, right? Even if it is merged, it will be in draft and then it will be in review, last call. It is not something that we are going to see in less than 2 months time period. So my question will be like one thing, the present proposed proposals that we have in EIP repository, do we have any consensus on that? Like if there is anything that can be pursued to be moved as a standard that can help in near future? and I know this is like way over the time that we have decided for it. So if people want to discuss this further in next meeting, we can probably come up with a date and time that works for everyone. And one important question that we wanted to get solved by this meeting was to have, if someone is willing to take kind of, a lead in that, and maybe working with the authors of these proposals to come up with like consensus or which all proposal we can move towards final, if there are more than one, because I understand with the discussion that it can be based on the use cases, not like individual proposals.
Just so I get to interject here real quick, I'm not here for a one-time adding my EIP. I'm in it for the long game, and I am totally down to help out with coming up with that chain list or token list or whatever we end up, or RPC list standard, and making it happen and actually getting it implemented in wallets.
So I think, who decided to schedule this for half an hour? What kind of crazy person schedules half-hour meetings?
We didn't know you were
I'll
coming,
take
Micah.
it.
I see. Okay. So just to throw a wrench in this conversation, I do actually agree with what Matt was saying earlier, that right now we have all these. You should know by now, Matt. I know when meetings happen, and I just can intuit this and show up. So there's this issue that right now we have these L2s and L1s that all try to look exactly like Ethereum, so that way they can work with Ethereum's wallets. And the reason for this is because it's much easier to use Ethereum wallets than it is to build your own wallet for your own ecosystem, right? Like no one wants to build their own MetaMask and their own Coinbase wallet, et cetera, et cetera. And so they try to make themselves look like Ethereum. I suspect this will work up until layer 2s start to get actually interesting. And I think they are going to start to get interesting sooner rather than later. When I say interesting, I mean, on these layer 2s, you're going to want to be able to do more different things that you cannot do on layer 1, and particularly you can't do on Ethereum. And when that happens, like this all breaks. And so I am with Matt that I'm a little hesitant to kind of go down this path of standardizing this behavior of like setting an expectation that you can just plug an RPC into a wallet and it will just work. I think that short term, that is true, and it does. I think that in the next 5 years, that will no longer be true, and we will have standardized a thing that no one uses because it doesn't make sense anymore. Because layer 1 long term is meant to be the settlement layer. It's not meant to be a dApp layer. Like it's not. The hope is that people will be doing all their dApp stuff elsewhere, which means the set of things you might want to do when interacting with your chain is going to be vastly different on the settlement layer versus the dApp layer.
Right, but that's what the dApp scheme is for, right?
I don't think we can solve this with a scheme. I think this is a fundamental problem with like long term. I don't think you'll be able to have one wallet that was designed for Ethereum and use it for Solana or Arbitrum or Optimism or Starknet or whatever. I think you'll have to get a wallet that was specifically designed to work with Starknet. And that might be MetaMask. Maybe MetaMask will support, Starknet and Ethereum and Arbitrum, but I think they will have to develop for each of them individually. And so I just want to be careful that, we're thinking about the long term here. And I think in the long term, this whole strategy might not make sense.
All right. So I know we are not going to get a solution right now, but at least we get some points to maybe proceed further. Yeah, you definitely gave us food for thought. So what do people think about having a call in next 2 weeks? Is that something reasonable? I know you requested for some time, look, that you may want to maybe able to connect with other wallets. If I get it right, I don't know.
I am currently in talks with both MetaMask and Rainbow to get the appropriate changes made and to get the ETH-URL parser updated everywhere to be able to support not only actually running custom functions of smart contracts, because currently take MetaMask for an example, only transfer and approve are allowed function names. And that needs to change. We need to be able to run any function name and any amount of arguments and any duplicate arguments. So I am definitely involved with the wallet development. And I have been talking with people at both Rainbow and MetaMask to get these changes into the wallet.
All right. And I'm assuming that is not specific to 5094, right? In general.
Not at the moment, no.
Yeah. Okay. That makes
Currently,
sense,
those
maybe.
changes are upgrading to TypeScript, adding a bunch of extra like tests, and shrinking down bundle size, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I will drop a PR link in the chat if you want to see it.
That would be helpful. Thank you. I think maybe we can circle back on the feedbacks that you may have collected and what other wallets have to say about it. What do people think about having the same call on 2 weeks from now at the same time?
Sure.
I can make any time.
All right. Okay. Then I'll try to schedule another one. We will definitely share the information in the way we have shared this time on different channels and invite as well. So if anyone wants an invite, please drop email address to me on Discord or anywhere. And maybe we will also get back on. Yeah, please, Matt.
Are you in the Discord? Are you in the wallet Discord, Luke?
I am not 100% sure. Could you send me an
invite and drop it? Yeah, 1 second.
So about max action item, talk to wallets about supporting RPC and RPC wallet list. Is someone willing to talk to? Or if there is if people want more representative of different wallets in this call, I can maybe try getting them on this call, if that's helpful.
I don't know, ask Matt. I'm just here for the lulz.
And I think if there's a little bit more time, probably I would like to discuss a little bit about ERC 4804. If people here are still available for maybe a few minutes.
I'm fine. I mean, we can go over 12 minutes if people don't have another call. So
sure. Let's share my screen. Let me see.
What number was it?
Yeah, so this is another URI standard I recently proposed and also covers with Sam Wilson. The basic idea is try to basically calling the contract and is able to translate a URL and calling a contract and then pass the corresponding data return to the user. And one application I'm thinking about is because we are developing L2 with a large storage on top of that. So we can use this standard to, for example, so we already built a gateway. So that, oh, it's not working. So it's able to basically upload a whole website or, for example, the example to query a contract of WUSDT on Rinkeby and basically calling the balance of function and then translate the corresponding ENS address to the corresponding address of Ether and return the corresponding value to the in the 256. And this is the result. The reason is that we checked all the IPS and haven't found any, for example, standard that is allow us to basically read the state from the Ethereum. So basically we created this kind of like a URL so that when user want to, for example, locate the resources on the Ethereum, kind of like basically you can in the Web 2 we have DNS, we have IP address. Now we have contract, we have ENS, so we are able to translate them and then to be able to locate any resources on top blockchain and then display it. I think this one should work. Let me see, ENS domains. Domains.eth. So this is example that we upload all the ENS website on top of Rinkeby. And so user can just type it using kind of like a standard browser. Right now it's using the gateway method. and this will basically load all the contract from the Rinkeby and then display using the web content. So this is another application that we would like to basically enable this decentralized website on top of Ethereum. Yeah. So any questions?
Just out of curiosity, why not just use IPFS?
Oh yeah,
It feels like it already does all this.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, like IPFS, that means, for example, it requires, for example, to clean the data. So that means that maybe lost. And further, if a user want to upload, for example, a content, it has switched to another platform. While in this way, so all the things is using the basically Ethereum stack is stored on the Ethereum. And so user doesn't need to worry about whether the website will be, for example, shut down. But definitely they can also remove the website by destroying the contract. So from a user perspective, it doesn't need to understand other technical stack like IPFS, Filecoin, AR. It just stick to one platform and can do whatever they want. And second is that IPFS is more like a static content. So people post the content, return a hash-aware link. But in this scenario, basically user can interact with it. We will basically dynamically create all the content returned to the user. It's kind of like we are running a web server backed by EVM, and also the server is by the Ethereum, all the nodes in the network, rather than, for example, we have, for example, reference pointer and point to the IPFS static content, but we are not able to modify all this content or dynamically generate this content. For example, if we want to compose NFT based on different state, then we can program what kind of a return data, SVG, then we can append those data, dynamic generate SVG, and return to the user instead of using static content.
So I think the problem you're going to run into is that storing data on Ethereum it's exceedingly expensive. Mm-hmm. And so no one will be able to afford to actually put a website on chain.
Yeah, that's the basically the purpose of our sidechain that's doing, basically because like my understanding, like L2 is trying to provide scalability. One scalability is in terms of like a transaction or computation, like arbitrum, optimism. Another way is feel about using the Ethereum technology. We should also be able to scale the storage dramatically. For example, terabytes.
So no one is currently working on an L2 that scales storage. The reason for that is because
right now.
I see. So you're trying to build a storage scaling L2.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, certainly more power to you. I think the reason no one has worked on it so far is because IPFS does a great job, especially with the introduction of Filecoin, allowing for permanent storage at paid permanent storage. And so my general recommendation is to figure out how to improve the IPFS integration, which is getting better all the time. Like, I browse all the dApps I use through IPFS already, and it works. I would be hesitant to go down a path of trying to replace that without, like, I understand the desire of having everything on Ethereum, but I don't think you're going to gain enough to be worth the effort. Like, building a decentralized storage system is a huge and hard project, and IPFS solved it well. And so I'd be hesitant to try to replace that. I think there are other things you could replace that would be much more valuable. That being said, I'm a big fan of people trying new things and exploring, and so I definitely I'm not saying you should not do it. Just be aware. You're basically competing against IPFS, which is hard.
Not to forget Arweave and Bundler.
Yeah, I think another is AR, but yeah, IPFS. I think probably that I agree, like that's a work in some direction. But like let's imagine, for example, we create kind of like dynamic blog website that is on top of like these technologies, or versus on IPFS. What's the difference there? Because like I feel like if a user, for example, when I create a blog, I need to go to IPFS. I need to click, for example, maybe
So I understand this proposal is also not merged yet because I can't find it in the list.
Oh, I think it's already merged. It just, yeah, I think it just, I think it was merged last week. I guess.
4804.
Yeah.
Okay. But then I may have missed it. I will like to add it here in the list so we have all the proposals in one place. Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing this. We could not reach to the conclusion yet, like which direction we would like to move, but it's a very good session in which we learned about some new proposals solving different problems. I guess we can have another meeting scheduled 2 weeks from now in which we can probably discuss on which all proposals we would like to move forward with. And if there are authors who are around to maybe able to push these proposals would be good. If not, then someone from whoever joins the call is willing to be a champion for that proposal, that would be helpful. Because as we get into layer 2 solutions more and more, it will be useful to have some certain standards and people be following them. Although I'm not sure if one proposal will be able to solve all the use cases, but definitely we'll try to get standard depending upon use cases. Yeah, I know Light Client has dropped off. He had to go and the meeting was scheduled for 30 minutes only. So just to sum up, just a reminder, if anyone wants to be added on the calendar invite, please drop me your email address on Discord. I'll be happy to add. Otherwise, we'll try to communicate the meeting information in the same way. Any last word from Micah before we conclude for today?
No, I'm not even supposed to be in this meeting.
Right, so it's always good, right? The people who are here, who are not supposed to be here, adding a lot of input, it's helpful and it's important to get different perspectives. So thank you for joining, and I'm sure this is helpful for all of us. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope to see you in 2 weeks. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care.